this is Margaret, and I'll be introducing Chapter 5, which is Rape and Child Molestation. I want to start by giving some statistics and then going into common myths that are associated with rape. So the first statistic is 22% of women ages 18 to 90 have reported being sexually assaulted in the United States. Another study shows that 13 to 16% are made up of rape victims. An average woman's chance of being raped is 1 in 10, and they are most likely to know their attacker. There are several myths that are associated with rape and the victims, which are commonly linked with the questions with who is likely to rape, how are rapes planned and executed, what is involved in different forms of rape, and why can't the victim be blamed for the rape. Unfortunately, the topic of rape does bring up several assumptions or myths, which will be discussed in this section. So the first myth I have are offenders target strangers, which is a false misconception because, as I said earlier, rape victims are most likely to know their attackers. The second one is rape occurs in the summer due to the heat, which causes arousal and passion. This is false. Summer does create a larger chance for potential offenders to meet victims just because there are more social interactions going on during this time of season. Another myth is rapists who participate in gang rape want to have sex with each other to express latent homosexuality. This is also false, and the book gives a good example comparing this assumption to the fact that the people who rob banks together want to rob each other, which is often not true. Another myth is date rape to offenders is a criminal crime, but according to the book, young rapists or young offenders do not see date rape as a crime, and many victims of date rape do not report it as rape. Another myth is victims all have trouble readjusting after their assault, whether or not they fought back or passively allowed the rape. This is false. The women who did fight back, scream, kicked, tried to get away, they were more likely to return to their regular normal lives than those who did not try to fight back or scream. Another myth is husbands are understanding and show more affection after their wife has been raped, which is unfortunately not true. The husbands whose wives were raped were more likely to be distant, less caring, less affectionate. This is usually because they felt like a part of their wife was stolen, or that they're not the same person. Another myth is all women have the potential to be raped despite if they are assertive or submissive, which is false. Women who are more assertive in public spaces, work areas, are less likely to get raped than those who show submissive traits. Another myth is rape in prisons occur to relieve sexual deprivation, which is false. Rape that occurs in prison usually have to do with power, dominance, control, not for a sexual release. And the last myth is same-sex rapes usually involve homosexual men, which is false. According to the book, the majority, more than half of the same-sex rape victims are heterosexual. Moving on, I want to talk about specifically the myth of victim precipitation. This is the idea that the victim agreed or wanted, caused, or allowed the rape to occur. Offenders take certain gestures or language and interpret it as the victim wanting or agreeing to sexual relations. It is often a biased male-centered view, and it's also known as the sexist myth. It implies that the victim is just as much to blame as the offender, which is not true. Victim precipitation has been applied to some homicides, but it is not applicable to rape cases. However, the concept of victim contribution is introduced in some rape cases. Victim contribution refers to prior forms of intimacy, like deeply kissing prior to the sexual assault, but victims cannot contribute to the rape because they try to stop it. So this basically means that anything prior to the assault that the offender might have conceived as wanting sexual relations cannot be used in a case of rape, because if the victim did in fact try to stop the assailant, then it's not applicable in that case. Another statistic regarding victim precipitation showed that 50% of young men interviewed considered it acceptable for a man to force a girl to have sex when she initially agrees but then changes her mind. It also says that 76% of high school males agreed to this statement.
Hello, my name is Alejandro Corral, and I'm going to be going over two sections that go under the patterns of rape, and that two sections include racial, age, and situational factors that lead to rape, and the second one is planning and execution. Well, looking in the first one, we see that racial factors contributes to a lot of situational rapes. It is commonly believed that most rapes are interracial, with the majority of them being black males sexually assaulting white females. To the contrary, most rapes are intraracial, meaning that both the rapist and the victim are of the same race. Menachem Amir in 1971 did a study in Philadelphia where 646 rape cases were measured in 1958 and the year 1960. He concluded that 95% of all rape cases were intraracial, and that only 3% of rapes involved a black rapist and a white victim. This low number was a result of stiffer punishments for interracial rape, and due to the segregation, this caused many of the races to never make much contact. But after the abolishment of segregation and the decades after, there was an increase to 19% of interracial rapes, but intraracial rapes remain the majority up to this day. The second factor is age. Rape has been recorded all over the United States in females from the age of 1 to the age of 80. The most common group is female rape victims between the ages of 16 and 20. Intraracial rape has the offender usually older than the victim, but in interracial rape, the black offender is usually younger than the white victim. This is due to the availability caused by the offender usually partaking in another crime, usually robbery or burglary, and the feeling that he should engage in raping. Offenders have very sexist views and have a mindset that raping is an additional bonus to their property crimes. And lastly is a situational factor. Most type of rapes occur during the summer months and usually take place over the weekend. This is because the time periods where people are out and about cause more social interactions and opportunities where offenders and victims can meet. Alcohol is also a factor that leads to rape and is often used as an excuse by offenders to justify their actions, as they cannot be held accountable in their eyes. Rapists on average are less violent and less likely to have a previous record compared to murderers. This explains why rapes aren't as explosive or impulsive as murders, but show that they are planned. The second part is going into planning and execution of these rapes. Rapes involve people that know the victim well, like friends, family, lovers, and acquaintances. Offenders might use sweet talk, romantic moves, alcoholic beverages, and other methods to get the woman vulnerable. A rapist might choose a woman that is vulnerable to attack. A woman might be chosen if there's a disadvantageous position, like a woman who is mentally challenged, sleeping, very young, or under the influence of drugs or alcohol. Also, women are targeted as if they appear submissive or passive, usually showing signs of low confidence. But some rapists do attack aggressive, confident, domineering women, saying that they wanted to pull a particularly uppity woman in her place. Women who are sexually assaulted by a stranger are usually tricked by their assailant with the faking of needs of assistance to make sure the woman is home alone. Rapists use verbal intimidation to scare women into complying into their demands. The rapist becomes more violent once the crime has been carried out and usually does not keep the victim's well-being in mind, usually being violent in intercourse. The rapist can go further and joke at the woman's expense and leave them emotionally scarred.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth Flores, and I will be doing a presentation from Textbook 1, Chapter 5, and I will be going over this section on the social psychological theory and also the feminist theory. And so, beginning with the social psychological theory on sexual permissiveness, it began with the sociologist Duncan Chappell. and his colleagues beginning to question why is the rate of rape higher in some societies than others. And this led them to theorize that the society with a high rape rate is more sexually permissive, meaning it is a society full of opportunities for men to have women's consent to have non-marital sex with them. And this then led them to another question: why would these men resort to force to get sex in a society where it is already relatively easy to get sex without the use of force? And this then led them to the idea of relative frustration. And this is when the men, encountering the same experience of being rejected by a woman, the men in a sexually permissive society feel more frustrated than the men in a sexually restrictive society, in which premarital and other non-marital sex is prohibited. For example, in a sexually restrictive society, a man is more able to take a woman's rejection because he can protect his ego by rationalizing that he was not rejected, not because he was undesirable, but because of the restrictive society that prevents her from having sex with him. He finds comfort from the fact that women are too sexually conservative due to her religion, her fears, or the laws of the society that she lives in. But in a sexually permissive society, the rejected man cannot use this kind of rationalization. He is likely to take the woman's rejection personal, seeing that it is he himself who is responsible for his own failure to win the woman's favor. And as a consequence, he will likely feel more hurt and therefore experience sexual frustration. And this is then, sexual frustration is said to drive many men in a permissive society, for example, the United States, Sweden, and modernized Western societies, to actually rape women. Therefore, the social atmosphere of sexual permissiveness produces a great number of rapes because it generates a great deal of relative frustration, causing men to take women's rejection personally. And this theory may explain why modern societies, again, such as the United States, as Sweden, may have higher rates of rape than traditional societies, such as China and India. And this also leads to the idea that modern societies tend to be more sexually permissive than traditional societies. And now I'm moving forward to the feminist theory in gender inequality. The social psychological theory of sexual permissiveness seems to suggest that gender equality produces more rape than does sexual inequality. Relative gender equality is more prevalent in the more sexually restrictive traditional societies, but feminist theorists blame rape on sexual inequality. Feminists believe rape is primarily an expression of man's dominance over women, which in turn is a reflection of society's sexual inequality. Rape then serves to intimidate women, keeping them in their place to maintain sexual inequality. The evidence on rape as an expression of male dominance exists everywhere. All over the world, no matter what society you find yourself, the majority of rape involve men raping women rather than women raping men. Men generally have greater physical, political, or economic power than women. Therefore, we can conclude that rape is largely an expression of male power over women. Peggy Sandy, in her study of tribal societies, found that some of these societies are relatively free of rapes while others are full of rapes. She discovered that male dominance is key in rape-prone societies. And these are societies that are defined as in which rape is treated as a ceremonial expression of masculinity, or in which men are allowed to use rape to punish or threaten women. Other researchers have also found rape to be high in colleges, where masculinity and male dominance is highly, highly valued. But the feminist theory has been regarded also as an exaggeration of the influence of male dominance on rape. For example, a prominent contributor to this theory is Susan Brown Miller, and she has argued and she has said, and I quote, "I believe rape has played a critical function. It is nothing more or nothing less than a conscious process of intimidation by which all men keep all women in a state of fear." But critics have not seen that all men would use rape to intimidate women. There are numerous men who do not want to dominate women by raping them. For example, in the cases of men raping their own mothers or their own daughters. But what Brown Miller may have meant to say is that rape is a primary expression, but not the sole expression of male dominance.
Hey guys, how's it going? My name's Kyle Froelich, and our group did Chapter 5. It's rape and child molestation. I'm going to go ahead and start with my sections, and the first one is the myth that women ask for it. And it says here there's a popular myth that women ask for it, and there's a secret, and they have a secret wish to be raped. And it says by various studies, okay, many people believe that women have an unconscious rape wish, okay? And apparently, this myth is expressed, in various different ways. But some ways you can often see it as, are when you hear people say, like she asked for it. Or another one is, like she actually wanted it. A similar one is, she lied about it. Or a real popular one, is she earlier consented to sex, but then later, she cried rape, and those are just a few to name a couple. There's a few more in here, but I don't need to read them all. And so what it's saying is, like that this myth, basically like a scapegoat, for people who are actually, intentionally, I'm not saying intentionally, but who rape people, they say these things, and they make it seem like women actually want to have it happen, but it does say here, even sex researchers of 2008 say that between 31 and 57% of women have a rape fantasy, and I don't know where they're getting this from, but it's a rape fantasy. I don't know if they if that, like if 31 to 57% actually want to be raped. That's, fantasies are different than real life, but this is just a scapegoat, I believe, for people who are actually doing it. They could just say that the women actually wanted it. I don't. So that's just what it says here. So I'm gonna move on. I believe, like who commits the rapes in here. It says, usually it's men. Usually they're, from low income. And usually they're, not very educated. And all three of those, usually link together. Oh, not the man part, but low income and education. And I guess it says also in here what provokes these people to do it. And once again, it kind of had a scapegoat kind of point of view, saying that it assumes the victim did something wrong, and provokes the man to raping her. So once again, it's kind of saying like she asked for it, and it says that a couple of the ways, that they're provoking is that something involves being like in the wrong place at the wrong time. Don't like they're saying like at a bar or walking home alone, like that's a reason, that's like a reason for someone, that's provoking a man to do something, because you're putting yourself in that situation. Turning a man on and then not doing anything after that, they're saying, is a reason to provoke him to do it. And basically, to finish this part off, the myth that women want to be raped is common, usually, like I said, with rapists. Like I don't think too many regular people think that's like average is for every woman to want to be raped. So it even says in the book that this myth, okay, that the women asked for it, that that she asked for it, that she lied about it, talking about how she earlier consented but now she's crying rape, being in, like believing that she was in the wrong place, so that gives you the right to actually rape someone. These fantasies, and these beliefs are only usually common with rapists, and that makes sense, because so it says that is why, according to various studies, most rapists, even those serving long terms, deny their culpability, so they don't take any guilt or any fault, and they believe that like the women asked for it. So that's it for this first section, and All right, you guys. So my next section is the global perspective on wartime rape. All right, and it says all these rapes reflect a universal shared attitude that women are men's property, and it says these are the same attitudes in U.S. culture. Okay, it says here, it was not uncommon for when armies conquered or destroyed property, they would also, rape the women as if they were property. So they would come in, they would conquer the land, and then because they conquered everything, they would also believe that the women now are their property, and they would do as they wish. So they would tend to rape them and torture them. There's many examples here. I'm going to just give a few. So during World War II, of course, like Germans versus the Jews. The Germans didn't only kill them; they tortured them, raped them, did a lot of things beforehand. As like it's a dominating. They feel it's like a dominating feeling. Number two, there was like the Japanese versus the Korean, China, and other Southeast Asian countries. So even Asian countries, they were doing it, torturing and raping to be after conquering their battles. There was a case in 1971, the Pakistanis versus Bangladesh. Okay, and this one is just insane. It says here that soldiers were shown pornographic movies. Okay, and they were let loose to literally rape at least 200,000 women, it says. And so, I mean, they had like a planned tactic to, go out there and honestly rape as many people as possible. And that's just crazy. That's in 1971. In 1992, Siberian versus Bosnia. When they did it, they considered it an ethnic cleansing. Okay, they literally went in and raped immense numbers of people, and they believed it was a cleansing. In 1994, there was the Hutus versus the Rwanda. And there's a 1999 Siberian versus the Kosovo, and even all the way up until 2004. We're getting into our generations. Sudan, used rape as a weapon of war. Okay, to humiliate Black African women, rebels when they were fighting, the government. So rebels would do this as a tactic of war. They used it as a weapon to scare the government. And this is in 2004. So the reason why they did it, on top of conquering people, is it's dehumanizing and it's brutal. Okay, so like they would rape people in front of their own family. They would make their own family members rape each other. It was literally they would kill people after in front of people. They would be abused months on end. It's just like one of the worst things in the world. It's like I said, dehumanizing. You feel like you're worthless, and I just like it's in wartime. It is crazy, and you get extreme trauma. I can only imagine, and if you're lucky to live, you literally have that for the rest of your life. So basically it says what happens after. So yeah, if you survive, they don't kill you after. Many parts of the world actually where the women come back, or where the women had been raped from, the women actually become regarded as basically like trash. They considered irreparable. They're considered damaged property, and they're considered valueless. So these women get abused and tortured, and then they come back, and no one basically wants them, even their own, husbands. Some traditions, it says here, women would be thrown out of their own home, um, like a piece of junk. It literally said, and it says sometimes, their own family, when they came back, would kill them because they brought shame to their family. That's what they believe. The woman got tortured and raped. They come home, and then the family believes that because they got raped, they disgrace the whole family. So it's basically like a lose lose. They get humiliated, dehumanized, and they get raped. And then when they come home, they're not even wanted because all that happened. Um, uh, so basically, of course, most of these people who are getting raped, of course, I mean, are women. Unfortunately, there's definitely a lot of men that get raped as well. But it's like soldiers are 9 out of 10 men. And when they go into other places, they're usually killing other men in the military, and they're conquering the women. So it's just purely by numbers. Of course, there's way more women, and there's way more men. So just but men still get tortured. They get forced to do masturbation. I guess it says here there's sometimes anal rape, and kicking of the genitals. So the guys still have it rough, but the women definitely are 9 out of 10 the people. they're getting it by far the worst. And that's the end to my section on wartime rape and their perspective. Thanks a lot. Take it easy.